We're about to get started. I know it's difficult when pizza is involved to manage the crowd, but it's a pleasure to be here. First, want to thank both Carol and Dick Daynard for your sponsorship, the Daynard Fellowship. I also want to thank Professor Lucy Williams, and this is one of our signature events and co-sponsorship with the Center for Public Interest Advocacy and Collaboration. So we're thrilled to have that collaboration be part of this event. And yeah, really, in looking at the bio and also kind of a few words for Prerna prior to the event, can't think of anyone that is such more of an exemplar of what the Daynard Fellowship is really about, and in particular, given the moment that we live in. So Prerna has actually lived the immigrant journey, and in living that journey has made tremendous impact, and impact both at the kind of personal grassroots level of providing legal services to those who are in need of that service, and Prerna's work with UC Berkeley, the immigration clinic there, so teaching students to get a learning component, but also the direct services component. But also, Prerna has done tremendous work at the policy level as well, to work related to DACA, high-level policy work, and has done so through harnessing youth and also leveraging social media and technology. So one of the things that Professor Williams and I talk about in terms of public interest lawyering in the 21st century is how do we make larger impact given the social dynamics. And I think the work that you're doing, Prerna, is exemplary of that. So without further ado, I introduce Prerna and give the floor to you. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me here today. I'm incredibly honored to be at Houston. I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would end up here from all the way growing up in a village in the South Pacific in the middle of nowhere. So that's always, I don't take myself too seriously. I think it's important to, especially in these times, to maintain a sense of humor and also to not think of ourselves as all important or any of those things. I work as an immigration lawyer in Berkeley, California. It's its own bubble. I'm incredibly privileged to have been raised in the Bay Area. My clients come from all over the world, really. Of course, Mexico, but also South Korea, Australia, even Canada sometimes, which I wonder about a lot. Which is an exchange program we could do where they use passport, they give me a Canadian passport, and it could be a free market of But since we're not there yet, I serve an incredibly diverse group of people with many unique experiences, at least in the area of immigration law and as immigrants. But what I've noticed over time is a common thread to every story is that somebody in my client's life, or my client, love themselves, or love the client enough to bring them here for a better opportunity, a better life. So it's the same reason that I'm here, because my parents wanted a better life for me. I was around 15 when my parents decided to pack up and move me from the islands of Fiji to the Bay Area in California. So that was a real time for big transition. It was I think a 12-hour flight at the time, away from everything I knew and everything I loved. And I lost a lot in the move. And I think it's been a defining experience for me. So, I mean, one note I would have is not to move your child anywhere between the age of 12 and 18, possibly. It's a very traumatic experience. And older is better and younger better, I think. But when you have this formative age that you moved in, it's a little troubling. I briefly considered running away. I was a troublemaking teenager, as an adult too, I guess. But now I had nowhere to go really in a new country. So we came to live with my uncle in the small town in California, Haywood. And they enrolled me in an urban high school, I think, in Haywood, and I started to pick up right off where I left off, basically, because nothing had changed. And I'm sure a lot of you have gone to high school in America. It's also kind of a fun experience. They can traumatize you for life. So my parents, as heroic and hardworking as they are, they could not prevent the fact that once, my visa, we sort of overstayed our visas. I'm 15, I don't even know what's going on at the time. So when it came to applying for colleges, we realized that I actually couldn't get a visa to attend college or any higher education as an international student, especially in a post-9/11 world where people who look like me are immediately categorized as either one, sexual deviants or terrorists. So that was, even in the Bay Area, that was still a defining experience for me. And when you're 17 and facing going on to higher education, and you're told that maybe you can, it's hard because, and I couldn't really live here, and I couldn't really live here either at the time because, one, I can't leave because that would mean saying goodbye to my family for at least 10 years. If anyone knows immigration law, they know that once you've been here unlawfully for at least a year, if you leave the country, you face a 10-year bar from coming back. So that wasn't a possibility for us. And then it was hard to live here because we didn't really know if I could go to school, get a job in a profession, drive a car, own a bank account, and any of those things that sort of are markers for adulthood. I still can't drive a car, and I'm working on that though. So at the time, I had no pathway to citizenship that I knew about, like many of the 12 million estimated. I guess there's new studies to say 20 million, we don't really know. Undocumented immigrants suicide here today. I have a friend actually from Boston who tells me that it's called the American dream for immigrants because you have to be asleep to believe it. It seems like, I feel like I've spent my life sleeping in a way. I'm not quite sure. It seems so much in the past now. But somehow I made it through college and grad school because with a lot of struggle, I think primarily because of the values that my parents instilled in me about hard work and perseverance and telling me not to have my immigration status define me. It was hard in practice because there's so many limitations on you when you're in college, knowing that you're getting an education, but you might not be able to put it to use ever. So, it was ironic that it was higher education that fueled a sense of sort of entitlement, in the sense that, wait a minute, I deserve something more, something better. So, it was October 2007 when I first heard about the DREAM Act. And for those of you who don't know, the DREAM Act is a piece of legislation that would give young undocumented people a pathway to citizenship. That's really all I did. I was sitting at home basically, helping my mother in her cleaning business. She had cleaning business I was helping with after getting my master's. And she was basically like, why don't you go and help pass this bill? And I think my mother expects a little bit too much from me, being a child of Asian parents who have all these expectations, fun expectations, no matter what. So I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean I can pass it? So you studied politics, so you know how to do these things. was like, okay, maybe she didn't quite understand what I studied either. So, but whatever. I had some time to fill, right? I'm sitting at home, sort of jobless, besides my one gig at night with her. So, I went online to this portal called the Dream Act portal at the time. It was such a long time ago, it's like a decade ago. But I met other undocumented young people online, just like me for the first time. This is 2007, who were sort of talking about the Dream Act and talking about its failure to pass and what we could do to make a difference. And somehow I met other people like me who wanted to do more than just complain or do more than just live in fear and in the shadows. So we talked a lot online, sort of forged friendships. We started with forming a volunteer-run organization called Dream Activists. And we were able to meet people across geographic divides because you're online, you can meet somebody living here in Boston or somebody living in Philadelphia and be talking to them and be able to form sort of an organization that reaches beyond just where I was California at the time. So our main goal was to pass the Act. A secondary goal was to basically end criminalization of immigrant communities. And when we started, we didn't really know where we'd go. Like, it was just like, oh, let's just form an organization, we'll talk about our stories, and, we'll see. There was not sort of like, oh yeah, we'll achieve something tangible. It was more like, this is what we had to do in order to change our own lives for the better. So, it didn't matter if anyone supported us or not at the time, and I realized that working within our communities and within ourselves was empowering enough. And that maybe if we build it, they will come, is sort of how I thought about things at the time. And early on I realized the stories are powerful, like our own narratives are powerful tools. And there was a general pervasive message that still exists to this day that, illegal is illegal, and we have to get in line and do things legally, and we can't reward, rule breaking and bad behavior. And we had to identify that message and then build a counter narrative to that narrative, right? And I think in some ways the Dream Act and the Dreamer narrative, in quotes, provided a tool to build this kind of narrative. So instead of illegal is illegal, what we did was basically think about, okay, well, what part of we're here through no fault of our own, don't you understand, and that there is no line, and also, the words undocumented American started being more pervasive, and they became common themes that we used to sort of counter the opposing narratives of ourselves as being lawless bodies. And we started with gathering stories at first, though, because stories are hard to disprove. They're lived experiences. You can't be based on this life. So that was essential at the time. And soon we started receiving messages from all over the country. People who found out about Dream Activists, they would send their story, they would share about their lives. And particularly there were people who were coming out to us as undocumented over email. And we gathered these stories and told them to each other as empowerment, as well as to the media, to politicians if we could, and anyone else who cared to listen. And it was also a way in which we forged community over time, where we sort of made friends who were undocumented in different parts of the country. And the way that things change is when we start coming out to each other. We borrowed a chapter from Harvey Milk and the LGBT rights movement, because those of us who come before us have a lot of wisdom to share. Always. And also because it didn't make sense for a lot of us who were queer to live in two different closets. It didn't make sense to come out as queer and not come out as undocumented. So a lot of the young people who were organizing were both queer and undocumented. So we're sort of breaking two closets at the same time. And more people started to come out because it was undocumented and great risks to ourselves at the time. But also knowing that there was a big community that did support us. It also helped us to have allies such as teachers, professors, law students that would help us realize the dream of higher education and do what a lot of people couldn't do, is sort of finish school with support of having allies and counselors. Because for me, if it wasn't for professors and counselors in college or grad school or law school, I wouldn't have been able to finish these things. So, and coming out and telling my story to these individuals was what helped then give me the resources I needed to basically achieve what I have achieved. So that was important. But soon enough we realized the stories themselves, powerful weapon, but not wasn't getting us anything, basically. So to go beyond storytelling. This was in part because, we were not seeing any tangible results. The DMAC was still on the back burner. There was a healthcare reform fight. Things were exhausting. We were sort of losing the immigration narrative and the whole mix of that. So we had to make a bigger impact and use different tactics like organizing and use social media to amplify our organizing, to fight for immigrant rights, to end detention, deportation, and these kinds of things, as well as pass the DMAC, of course. So what we did was we started working on one case at a time, and the cases we got from the stories people were sending us, these are legal cases that involve like deportation and people who would have been threatened with deportation or had final orders of removal who would be basically deported without intervention. So, for example, an individual would contact us with their story and seek our help and assistance in getting like another result for their case, basically. And we would try to work with their lawyers, or in the absence of lawyers, just them and the family, to amplify their case, to get public attention to the case, to apply pressure on politicians locally, as well as in the state, as well as federally, to come out in support of the individual, try to promote a private bill for this individual, or ask ICE to stay their deportation. And so one by one, these local, like one-off campaigns in various parts of the country helped to build sort of many local immigrant groups, immigrant rights groups around those local campaigns, because as people got to know each other and other like-minded people in the community and other undocumented people in the community, they used to get together and sort of work on other campaigns together as well. So it helped to also build more alliances as part of a larger network of undocumented youth groups across the country. With the common goal, of course, eventually being get immigration reform, get the DREAM Act, and so on. But still, we needed to escalate with all these local groups, because winning one case at a time required so many resources from, again, a volunteer-run organization. So the goal was always to get something larger, something bigger for a lot of us. And at some point or other, we just decided to throw our ideas, like what if people before us done to get what they needed. So civil disobedience was one of them, which was a great risk because you can get picked up and sent back to wherever else. I mean, not even anywhere you're from. I have friends who are from Bangladesh and sent back to Mexico. That's happened, and they're back now. But we started conducting civil disobedience actions all over the country, and it was the scariest thing possibly that we did after coming out, that is. But I think it happened, and it was a great risk because we were not getting anywhere, because living in this country in the shadows or without being able to realize the full potential wasn't really fulfilling us, and sort of had our backs against the wall, and this was the only way to go for a lot of people. And we decided, okay, this is something new, we should try it and see how it works for us. So what we did was we tried to use this dreamer narrative of being dressed up in caps and gowns and going to different political offices across the country, starting in actually McCain's office in Tucson in 2010, May, and sat down and just asked him to go sponsor the DREAM Act and refused to leave and risk arrest. And risking arrest meant, for a lot of us, that we would be sort of put into the immigration pipeline from law enforcement to immigration and deportation. So it was a tremendous risk, and we didn't know what was going to happen, to be honest, because we had people who were already in Mexico with money to resettle us, just not knowing how the government will react to these things, but also having trust and faith in each other that we'll have each other's backs. So we really know this will succeed when we started doing it. And much to our surprise, there was a lot of hesitancy when it came to arresting us, as well as starting deportations. The vast batch of people who tried civil disobedience, whether it was in Congress or whether it was in a local statewide office, their criminal cases were not to be found. There was a trespass charge, and it's sort of gone, sealed, done away with. Can't really see it. There were lots of notice to appear in immigration proceedings that were issued to people, but they were never filed in court. So somewhere in the administration sort of put a halt to stopping these people, but basically stopping us from being deported, essentially. And we still don't really know who and what and when and why. But I mean, I think it was because we also had built critical allies in the administration who did support us and did believe in what we were doing. So, ultimately, for all of us, it didn't matter if we failed or succeeded, that we had made a mark, and sort of coming out and publicly doing these actions was empowering in and of itself. And declaring ourselves as undocumented, unafraid, unapologetic was a victory in and of itself. And that seemed enough for some of us, but not a lot of us. So we kept pushing though. After the DREAM Act failed to pass by 5 votes in the Senate, I remember, to go back to square one and be like, okay, well, what can we do in terms of, we have a Congress that is not helpful, but we do have an administration that really cares about its image as a pro-immigrant immigration. And, we should try to push them to do something. So the next thing was, okay, well, how about we take something called states of removal, which is like deferred action, and ask for collective deferred action for everybody who would have for the DREAM Act, say. And it seemed like a pipe dream. It was suggested, we'll ask that a lot of lawyers laughed at us too. You can't do that. That's not legal. The administration won't do that. But somehow, it was 2012, I believe, and support for Barack Obama was sort of waning in the polls a little bit. And what we had done was there's all these Organizing for America offices across the country. And so what we had been doing was take our caps and gowns and go sit in those offices and dare the administration to arrest us and look really bad to the same people that they get votes from. So I think it was a pivotal action. I think there are also a lot of allies who are pushing the administration to do DACA as well. So it came down to, okay, well, if you give us DACA as soon as possible, we'll sort of stop occupying the offices and emptying them out so you can actually get back to running for office. And somehow they listened to our bluff because we didn't really have the numbers. I mean, we're talking about like 20 people who are really in caps and gowns and maybe like 4 other social media communications people amplifying. It's a very limited number of people who are doing all these things, but somehow appearing to have the media on our side as well as be able to use social media to then like do live video shoots and put it on Facebook, put it on Twitter, especially of cops arresting people of color in caps and gowns. I mean, those images are powerful and they stayed with us. So I think, the administration didn't like what it looked like to them. And, sure enough, I think that was one of the reasons that Obama sort of surged in the polls and won re-election as well. And because we're talking about father's legacy, really, even though it was something that a lot of us, risked put our lives on the line for. But the DACA program, small is what really helped a lot of my peers and me to, one, not get deported, but also, I work permit to be able to live here and work here, and to not have to worry about living full lives here. So, thanks to DACA, more than 700,000 people won the ability to go to school, continue to build their lives here without fearing deportation. It was a very significant policy and legal victory. Also was a very significant cultural victory, at least now it seems like that, because whether or not we had papers or the right to live here, I think more and more Americans started to believe that we did belong here. And that was really important as well. But we have to keep pushing the envelope because it's never enough to just have this sort of piecemeal reform for a small group of people who are at this point privileged, right? So there was a downside to DACA of the DREAM Act that we didn't really realize because we were so close to it at the time. It's a double-edged sword, right? Because now we have created and extended this good immigrant, bad immigrant dichotomy. And that's sort of, I think, been our biggest failure as a movement of young undocumented people, because not everyone qualifies for DACA, sure, but then everyone doesn't qualify. It can't really fit into neat, clean narratives or boxes, really, of being good immigrants with no criminal records who deserve to live here, right? So some of us tried to push for more because it didn't seem fair to put people in the bus, basically, for mistakes that they might have committed, or people who sort of been fit into rigid categories that DACA had for them. So we started to work on the Not One More campaign, and which meant not one more deportation, really, and try to get deferred action for our parents, and sort of other immigration relief policies to sort of test the power of the last administration to do something on immigration reform. Unfortunately, I mean, we were able to do mass actions like Bring Them Home campaign, where I think 3 of us self-reported ourselves to Mexico to bring back like 50 more people. It was pretty controversial, high risk. You know, people ended up being deported as well. No one that was here, they also ended up winning their cases. But it's just, it was high risk action. It burned out a lot of people and led to a lot of movement crisis, I think, because it was right during the time when Congress was supposedly trying to pass immigration reform, although not really getting anywhere either on that. So what people did was, you know, they went to Mexico, came back across the border, asked for asylum. And, you know, it wasn't, the strategy wasn't really asking for asylum. It was more like, well, when you get detained because you asked for asylum, you can organize people who are in facilities across the country who are also asylum seekers, who actually qualify asylum seekers, and who should not be there. So in some ways, we sort of use the privileged bodies of undocumented young people to then help others who, you know, are here because they fear persecution, to be able to get them out. And, you know, we were able to get about hundreds of people also out on what is called parole, to await their cases, to be able to get their detention to stop their deportations as well, give them stays of removal. It was helpful, but it was a small part of it, really. And I feel like rampant immigration enforcement continued because now Obama had given, you know, 700,000 of us something that we could feel free to do other things. So we had mass immigration crackdowns as well as detention, and the whole crisis with the borders, the border with unaccompanied minors, I guess. So at the end of his term, by the end of his term, Obama was called deporter in chief with 2 million deportations in 6 years, and he gave the label as well. So, but it was labeled to give him so that he would do the right thing on all these areas. Somehow, though, we ended up with Trump as president, which a lot of us, I mean, we should have expected this, I guess, as a white lash, but also all the work we had done thus far was now on the chopping block. And as many of you know, that probably no stranger to immigrants, immigrant rights, legal immigration has all been that effect with this administration, you know, from the Muslim ban to from the protection of the border to what's happening right now. So it's a busy time to be an immigration lawyer. It's also a lot of job security, I guess. But also there's a lot of need in our communities to be addressing this. So it's, you know, it's really important to be involved still. And even though I sometimes am like, maybe I should stop doing this work, I keep being drawn back to this as well because this is where my community is, this is where my friends are, this is where my family is. So I mean, I guess I often get asked by people where to go from here in these times and what to do. And I won't lie and say that I got up every Monday hoping it's Friday and that I dread getting on social media and when I'm seeing the news. Because it is also part of self-care in these times where you're like, there's so much bad that you have to just step away from it sometimes and just take a breather. And I think the only way I can consume the news is with some sense of dark humor. Like, you know, well, I guess no one can immigrate here, but even that can change anyway, so what does it matter? Or telling my clients to go north, Underground Railroad, I guess. Because things are hard. I mean, right now, for immigrants in America, and you really want to be immigrating here, as a question. And, you know, I've realized over time that people come to America because they're fleeing something worse than what they have here. So that is challenging as a lawyer as well. So we have great challenges. We also have great opportunities, I think, at this time to build something new. And I think it's important to learn from the wisdom of those who have lived through these similar times under the Bush administration, Reagan, and know that things do ultimately get better, or we do tend to somehow make things better, right? With the power of our expansion and power of community. So, I mean, as a lawyer, I think working in public interest with a lot of students. You know, I know that most students are interested in immigrant rights ever before. I see that as like a silver lining of the Trump administration, that people want to get informed. They are into immigration as well as an anti-Trump thing, but a lot of people also get drawn to it because they really believe in the cause, I think, and they hate what's being done to immigrants right now. So I think for those of us with capacity, now is the time to sort of educate and teach younger minds everything they can learn about this field, and invite more people to learn about the law. For those of us who are working in policy and advocacy, I mean, we know that we're playing a lot of defensive game in Congress. We have a Congress that just doesn't legislate and doesn't really care to be a check and balance on the president anymore. So I think a lot of the attention of activists who've been involved in immigrant rights has shifted to the state level as well. So we're focusing on passing state legislation in order to counter Trump. And immigration is a federal thing, so we're sort of limited in what we can do at the state level. But also I was trying to think creatively, like, okay, what can we do? Some of the things that we've been focusing on pushing, at least in California and some other more progressive states, is like redefining a misdemeanor so that it doesn't ever lead to deportation, or trying to expand who gets institution. So that's been one of our priorities, as well as like making the state a sanctuary state, in that ending all cooperation between local law enforcement and ICE, and even in jails as well. So unless somebody has committed a quote-unquote serious crime, they don't get handed over to ICE. So basically not doing ICE's job for them, essentially. So that's been critical as a state legislature to be doing that and to pass those ideas. Very recently we passed a bill in California to end all new facilities for detaining immigrants. So starting from this year, there can be no new immigrant jails basically built in the state of California. Of course, there's a lot of controversy because they're like, well, we'll move our client to other places. And it's like, well, you don't want clients to detain, period. But it does happen that people, when they are lack of space, get moved to remote parts of the country with bad law. So it's always advocates are trying to like know what the best thing to do is in a situation like this. Litigation has exploded as a field in recent times. We're seeing the federal government on many different grounds, from getting information to FOIA litigation, as well as fighting as a Muslim ban, protecting DACA, which is kind of nice because if we didn't think DACA would survive this long into the administration, it actually has still. So legal strategy continues to be a part of pushing back, but it can't be the only thing that we're using. And the other thing that we're doing right now is cross-pollination of ideas, right? It's time to step back, I think, from a lot of things, and to think holistically a lot about where we can make impact. And look for other movements as inspiration, movements like Black Lives Matter, movements like Me Too and Time's Up. And I mean, for me personally, it's the intersection between criminal law and immigration law that I'm most interested in, because we have a criminal justice system in this country that has historically targeted people of color as a basis of picking who we want in this country, who we want to deport from this country. And for far too long in the immigrant rights movement, because of the anti-blackness movement, we have left people behind with criminal convictions who most need our advocacy, really, at these times. So we, as a movement, I believe we need to move away from cherry picking between whose lives matter, whose lives don't matter, essentially. And I think we protect everyone when we take care of the members of our community that are most vulnerable from deportation and detention. And I mean, immigration as a field intersects a lot with any other field. So I think we have to think boldly and creatively and forge new alliances to work towards, I guess, our common interest. We also live in a world where it's getting easier to name things. It's getting easier to see white supremacy and white nationalism. And people say, oh yeah, that's because of this. So our immigration laws have never been gender or race neutral, and I think people are more and more willing to look at how they're not race and gender neutral, and to reimagine what it can look like for future generations as well. So I think that's also about there's value in that too. I think two more takeaways. One is being uncompromising in our vision as well, because what you've learned from the past is that sometimes advocates try to negotiate ourselves down to the least common denominator, but that excludes a lot of people in the process, and that we need to demand justice for everybody so that we can get justice for somebody. So too often as a movement, we're throwing people under the bus, and I think we need to start doing that as a movement. And then finally, I would say what I've always sort of said, even when I was an undocumented organizer, is that it's really critical to follow the lead of people who are directly impacted in whichever field you're practicing in. Because I feel privileged that I'm no longer undocumented, but I'm always checking myself and listening to my friends and clients who continue to be undocumented and to have less privilege than me. And it's important to listen to them and think about how we can help them fight for their own freedom. So it's critical to involve people in conversations about their own lives. And for far too long in this country, we've sort of made decisions about people without involving them in the process. And I think we can step back now and sort of look at these things and change and who we think should be leaders and who should sort of be an ally basically or an accomplice in this sense. So I think it's a good time to sort of reevaluate where we are and where we can go from here. Thank you.
Open this up for questions because I'm sure many of you
All questions.
want to ask a number of things. But first I want to mention two things. Prerna, one of the beauties of the Daynard Fellowship is that Prerna is here for 3 days. They are here to serve as a mentor for you. And you have the opportunity to meet with Prerna individually or in groups and talk with Prerna about this amazing experience and the wonderful advocacy that they have shared with you here. So I really encourage you to do that. We have several slots that are still open, and I'm trying to think of who you can see to sign up for those. I think Mariah, you have the ability to sign people up, right? Mariah, raise your hand, Mariah. Okay, Jasmine, you do? Yeah. All right, Hannah, Nathalia, Evan. All right, so you've got, just look at the hands that are up. So that, these are people that you can sign up with. So make sure you do that. Okay, because this is an opportunity that the Daynards have given our students to meet with wonderful advocates like Prerna. And you may think it's a little scary because this is an awesome human being, but Prerna is not scary.
I'm about to,
I promise you. They are wonderful, and they want to talk to you, and they want to share with you so that it will make you better advocates. The second thing I want to mention is that on Wednesday, Prerna and Hamath, where are you? Gundavarm, have put together a roundtable entitled Define Borders and Binaries, Legal Resistance and Civil Disobedience During the Rise of White Nationalism. That will be in this room at noon on Wednesday. And Hamath, do you want to say a word about that?
Yeah, we just have, Prerna will be there along with me and 3 other advocates from the area. We have Patricia Montez, the Executive Director at Centro Presente, and Prerna mentioned that a lot of organizations are sort of suffer, maybe that's what you said, but that are not immigrant-led, but Centro Presente is actually an immigrant-led immigrant rights organization. We also have Daniela Carvajal, who is a DACA recipient, a current DACA recipient, who works at Centro Presente, and is also a community organizer. And then Marissa Howe, the managing attorney at KIND, Kids in Need of Defense, which represents unaccompanied minors, which is obviously a major issue today. So all 3 of them and Prerna will be at the round table. It will be at noon in this room on Wednesday.
Perfect. So this is something for you, but now I'll open it up for questions. Thank you.
Hi, Prerna. What do you think the role of an allied attorney might be, such as yourself now, to grassroots movements of oppressed folks such as as yourself in the past, like I said, as an ally, promoting or working together with those organizing movements?
I would like to think more in terms of being an accomplice, in the sense when like my students / clients are surprisingly, I found out on Facebook that they're doing a civil disobedience action without consulting with their attorneys. And you know, the critical thing is not to be angry about it or egoistical about it, but to take it in stride, knowing I'll do the same thing and just bring them coffee, you know. So I think a lot of the job, at least my job right now, is to support people in taking whatever battle, tactic, strategy they want to take upon themselves to just be there for them. And, you know, as a sounding board, as well as just somebody who has been there, you know, and to connect them with one, resources, as well as if they have questions about the law and how it applies to them, and how they can sort of navigate those issues. Also, holistically speaking, you know, just more than a lawyer, I think really helps to help students who are struggling with higher education and just looking for mentorship as well. I think that's been a big role that I've played in the past for students anywhere, really, mostly at Berkeley, where a lot of times they came to office hours not for legal advice, but for like just counseling. And you also end up being a social worker to your clients too sometimes. So there's a lot that goes on in being an immigration lawyer, where you're not just dealing with like the law and legal stuff, but also being open to being a counselor and therapist and social worker. So I think that's sort of, you know, very multiple hats. I think is pretty critical right now.
Hi, I'm Rachel Rosenblum. We've been emailing, but we haven't. Hi. Thank you for this wonderful talk. I wanted to take up this question of the narrative, the dreamer narrative that you mentioned, and the kind of the trap of only putting forward the straight A students and the valedictorians and the kind of the blameless victim, or you know, the sort of the worthy, perfect American dream, and the evolution of that message. But even in its kind of broader framework, with Not One More, what you have is a very sort of personal, a focus on, here's this person and their family and their kind of personal value. And what strikes me is that in other places, like in Europe, you know, the narrative has been much less about the people who are seeking help, but more about the government, and the kind of like, you know, we are here because you were there. Right, this idea that it's not, you can't start with people crossing borders, right? You have to start with a much broader historical understanding of why people are coming here to begin with, and what governments, this government and other governments have done to destabilize countries that people are not coming from, et cetera. And I'm just wondering if you could reflect on why that sort of hasn't gotten as much traction here in a way as it might have.
I think that's a great question. I mean, I tend to believe that a lot of my friends and I are here because I know, you know, the U.S. government destabilized regimes, caused wars, you know, so many different things. So imperialism is a big part of why immigrants even come here. And I wonder, because I mean, a lot of us have talked about it, but it never has sort of led the same traction, because I think fundamentally because I think it was more able to sell the fact that people are blameless and victimless, more so than trying to actually being honest about really the reasons we're here, mainly because of being branded as anti-American a lot, and which sort of goes against the whole narrative of, oh, we belong here. If you don't like it here, you should leave. Basically, if we start criticizing, American foreign policy. I think a lot of the pushback we got was, well, you can do somewhere else, basically. But really, there's nowhere else to go when you have your homeland is ruined. So, I mean, I think it's critical, to sort of extend upon and start talking about the U.S. imperialism in these immigrant rights spaces. And I think a lot of times there's been millions of dollars that have been poured into figuring out the right message, right? For immigration reform, and the right message to to give to the American people. And anti-American, quote-unquote anti-American themes don't really resonate as well as undocumented Americans and, children who are blameless. So, I mean, I think there's a fall of lies in the movement in terms of listening to polling and research on the words we should be using, and that's a trap, and I don't agree with it. And I do think that we should be talking more in broad terms about really the reason people are here, and it's unfortunate that we're not.
I would be interested to hear a little bit more about the intersectionality between the two roles of being an organizer of that, your original organizer advocate, and now how you use that in the legal profession, like where the overlap lies and where the limitations lie, for example. Because I feel like a lot of immigration lawyers or people that tend to do this kind of work have an organizing background because you're so passionate about that work or have been personally involved in it. So wondering where the overlap is there and how you can use your organizing skills in the legal profession.
Yeah, I mean, the funny, I was once told by a lawyer that it's easier to be an organizer turned lawyer than a lawyer turned organizer, because lawyers don't necessarily, just coming straight through school, don't really have organizing talents or perspectives, I guess, as opposed to being an organizer turned lawyer where you have all this experience as an organizer and perspective as an organizer. And the law, you see the law is just like one tool in terms of being able to change policy, or the law means to give people legal status. So, I mean, I think that there's some overlap between the two. I think it's important the law is pretty confining and constrained, especially in the area of immigration. You're undocumented for the most part, unless something happens to you and that happens to you. So, I think, given that law is so constricting, I think it's important to value people who are pushing against it and trying to reimagine a different life for themselves and reimagine different laws for themselves. So, I mean, I think it's critical in that sense. I also think that and the older we get, because our frontal cortex develops a little bit more, you take less risks, whether you go away or not. So I can't imagine myself sitting in an office today as opposed to 15 years ago, because you have so much more loose later on in life. But it's important to have that perspective, though, and know that I was doing this 20 years ago, so people should also, should be free to do this as well. So I think being able to also promote youth activism as well is important, and to be able to mentor students who sort of follow your path or your lead or something else too, because we don't have the answers essentially just because we lived through something, I think.
Yeah, I thought you said something really poignant about the DACA program and how it is a very beneficial thing. It's something that's really good, but there's this slight negative in the sense that it seems to create this sort of hierarchy within the immigrant community of those who are privileged to have DACA and those, the majority who do not. And I was wondering if you could sort of reflect on or comment more on how grappling with that within the immigrant community. Because I know there's folks who complain about, for instance, like Cuban Americans who have gotten refugee, gotten asylum status via, U.S. politics, our stance towards Cuba versus folks from Central America who are fleeing situations in their countries. So it's like, what methods have worked to grapple with that?
I think when we started to, say, organize for the DREAM Act in 10 years ago, we had this a lot of serious conversations about creating haves and have-nots, basically, and creating this hierarchy of the lowest hanging fruit, basically getting immigration reform, and the others basically being left off. And they're difficult. It was difficult to grapple with these things because, on one hand, at the time, 12, 15 years ago, you had these immigrant rights organizations that weren't really immigrant-led. So it was hard to take them seriously. And it was like, wait, you're an immigrant, you're an immigrant, why are you telling me how to fight for my freedom, basically. There's a lot of that tension. between undocumented youth who are like, this, I'm fighting for my freedom, versus you don't even have this lived experience. So I think, because of that lack of lived experiences and people in positions of power who hadn't lived this life, I think it was sort of easier to not listen in a sense. And also because when you're fighting for your freedom, you're also fighting for your family. I don't know a single individual with DACA today who is not working hard for their family, who's undocumented, or their friends. I think there are people who are giving back to their communities. I think it's been an enormous, boost really for their families where somebody has DACA. So it's not like undocumented youth would just leave their parents behind or left their parents behind. I think that was sort of our pushback in the sense that, we can't get immigration reform for everybody, but let's try to get it for ourselves and then try to expand upon it. And, it was almost successful with getting DACA. And unfortunately, it got struck down in the courts, and then we have a different administration completely now. So it's a different world altogether, I think. But, no one would have sort of predicted like 10, 13 years ago that this is what's going to end up with, essentially. But yeah, it's always been and those of us who got DACA or our legal status, have always sort of felt some responsibility, I think, in terms of being part of creating this narrative that suits, us, but not necessarily a lot of other people. And that's sort of part of why I continue doing this work, because, it's sort of my way of giving back. Yes?
So I know this quote moment seems pretty impossible to work through on this front, but is there a large Dream Act style project that you can envision in the future? And then what is the environment for that look for immigration reform like that? What is that environment look like in your head?
Sure. I think sometimes people tell me that, DACA has sort of stopped the fight for immigration reform, in the sense that it sort of kills the impetus for passing the DREAM Act, because all these students have DACA, why are you worried, just give them DACA and move on along. So, when Trump started attacking DACA, there was a lot of movement last year to finally get the DREAM Act passed. There was some bipartisan energy for it. I don't know if it's real or fake at the time. But, there are some friends of mine who pushed for a DREAM Act with terrible sort of side effects to legislation, who would, push for a bill that came with lots of enforcement of the border, basically. It's of course their decision to make at this point what they want to push for. But, it just seemed like the only thing to push for in these times for a lot of people who are like, well, we can't really lose our right to work, to lose our mortgages, we'll call it an economic crash, but nobody seems to be thinking that way, unfortunately. But, I think, right now is the time to sort of re-envision, what we can do if we have sort of a more sane presidency and Congress that actually wants to make a difference and change things for people. I think, for me, I think immigration reform has always looked like making sure that nobody's left behind in the process, as well as trying to create a system that makes sense for the vast majority of people who want to come here. I think that, it takes a decade to 2 decades to reunite with their family members when it comes to immigration, like family immigration. The backwards are worse in people in certain countries. I think these things are what creates people who are undocumented. I think the unlawful presence bars are terrible. If people could just go back and forth, they would. Unfortunately, they get stuck here and they still live here. One of the things that have been interested in doing is the registry from 1970. I don't know, I think last passed during the last amnesty in 86 was like, okay, there's a sort of a statute of limitations on being undocumented. Basically, if you've lived here since 1971 and you prove it, you get a green card. So that needs to be updated to not be 1971, but something more recent. And if you lived here for 5 years undocumented, you can get your green card, basically. So, there are ways to simplify the law. We have made it more complicated than it used to be, essentially. And I'm hoping that, someday we have a chance to make it more simple. Any other questions?
This is a follow-up, I think, to Rachel's line of questioning, which is, it's one thing about what government policy is in terms of foreign policy and destabilization, but in many respects it's economic policy and a neoliberal economic order and huge inequality globally, but even here. And there's this clash of myths that, one, people should be able to make it where they are, and people should stick where they are, but also there's a land of opportunity here. And so many people are, in essence, really economic refugees, much more than simply escaping violence, and for good cause. Those economic realities are not, they don't fall out of the sky. They arise out of policy that's enforced by business and governments. And then the myth that there's great opportunity for everyone here, it's really degraded opportunity here, but it's still used as it's, in a sense, a justification for people coming here. They're often coming from something terrible to something only slightly less bad, right? And so that's a complicated story to tell. And maybe you don't think it's true, but it's a complicated story to tell, but it seems to me that that's also not being discussed very much in talking about what are the political realities of the immigration crisis, both domestically and elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I feel like we are, sort of losing, in terms of narratives, I feel like, now our narratives are pervasively promoting white nationalism and white supremacy, at least in the administration, that we're sort of in the defensive side, as, of trying to promote studies of how immigrants are, economically vital, and studies about how they integrate, and these things where we can make immigrants seem harmless and net positive, as opposed to actually, criticizing the root causes of migration and how, as a country, we're not any better than other despotic regimes, really, at this point. So, I think it's unfortunate that we're in these times where we're not self-reflective as that we can be. And I would just say it's unfortunate that we're here, I guess, as opposed to anywhere else. But I do have faith that things will get better. At least judging from how they've gotten better for a small segment of people over time, to eventually. Also, people vote with their feet too. They might vote with their feet and go elsewhere. That's the other thing that happens to a lot of my clients who want to come live in the U.S. and can't. They're still thinking where to take themselves next. So, sometimes, the reality is that maybe someplace might be better for them than here, unfortunately, and you have to recognize that as a human being, that could be true. Yeah.
No one else wants to ask a question, I'll ask. So I'm going to push back a bit, because it seems to me that in the age of Trump, the simple, powerful message is the one that's the most effective. So this goes back to your point about leveraging social media and images in terms of DACA. And that the more complicated and nuanced argument is the better argument, but it unfortunately can be the losing argument. So I'm just trying to figure out the terrain between the practical versus the theoretical.
Yeah, one of the things, we say in California high schools that, we didn't cross the border process. That's pretty popular there. That's, sort of our understanding from where we are. And it's true that, we're here because you're there kind of thing. I think we try to simplify this complicated dual mass messages, but yeah, it's just lost in translation, especially in the age of Twitter and in the age of people who don't want to listen to more than 140 characters really. So it's a difficult time, to sort of create other narratives, but it's also worthwhile to do so, because the more people who hear it, I think, and the more people who change their minds, I think, and I would hope that it catches on. I didn't think the whole demon narrative would catch on, but it did. So, there's always hope for different messages to catch on, depending whether locally or state or nationally. So I think, there's this value in thinking about these things and to try to reframe the immigration
Well, if there are no other questions, I think we just want to say thank you so much. Prerna.